And the next keynote that we will hear, all the way from Brussels, he just arrived, thank you so much for coming, is evidence versus seduction, which is a real struggle. And we heard it before, and when we have a look at the political and global landscapes of politics and what we heard as well today, that even evidence and facts are influenced by how they are perceived, makes this even more relevant. We will discuss now how science can influence policymaking during turbulent times marked by political division, economic strain, and social unrest. As both an academic and a founding member of the Brussels-based policy tank, he is always advocating for evidence-based policies that we have heard a lot about today. In this keynote, he will share first-hand lessons from his experience engaging with policymakers, where rigorous analysis intersects with lobbying pressures, ideological barriers, and electoral concerns, making it more difficult for evidence to be heard. This is a topic that we have discussed in the others as well, and it's a really relevant topic when we see in Luxembourg, even in the last panel and also internationally. Please welcome him with me here on stage. He's already on stage. Jean Hindriks, welcome. Professor of Economics at the Université Catholique de Louvain. On va faire un tout petit test. Où sont nos amis francophones? Faites un peu du bruit. Our English-speaking friends? Is there somebody who does not speak French? A few, maybe we can do a mixture. The slides will be in English, I believe. As we are used to here in Luxembourg, we will do a great mix. The stage is yours.
Okay, thank you to have me here today. Just coming from Brussels, presenting a policy paper on local pension. I think the pension is also a big issue in Luxembourg. And at the local level, trust me, it is an even worse big issue. So what I plan to do today is to share about 20 years of mixed feeling about my interaction as an academic and as a researcher with the policymaker. And I think the title is summarizing quite well my message, is that you struggle every day, every hour, between evidence, you want really to be factful, and at the same time you understand that if you want to have an impact, there is this temptation to use and to simplify your message and to go for the seduction. And this is also a tension between academics and think tanks and policymakers. So what I will do a presentation that is mixing French and English in two parts, 10 minutes each. First part is the Western, okay? Second part is the struggle. So the Western is just sharing my mixed feeling between the good, the bad, and the ugly experience I had. So let's start with the good, okay? The good is this one, and it is the most recent. In some sense, I've been learning, okay, from my mistakes, and I decided to go for a different communication way. So instead of writing big report, full of data, full of bar charts, I decided to go for a scrollytelling. The scrollytelling is really assembling administrative data at a very granular level and to transmit them in a sort of a data visualization that is easy to understand, okay, and easy to read, that is accessible to anyone on a key issue. So the key issue here is a fundamental objective of the Belgian government, which is to reach the 80% employment rate. The reason why this government would like to reach that 80% employment rate is for public finance, mostly. They consider that if they can reach the 80% people on the job, this will bring tax revenue, this will reduce spending, social security spending, and this will help to close the deficit. That's, okay, the explicit objective of that government. The question is, how far are we from this? And how do we measure employment rate? Because when you ask people, what's the employment rate, they have different interpretations. So we start from a very simple definition, which is already a good pedagogical approach. You take the population in a working age. So what is the working age? This is between 18 and 64. This is the official definition. So you have a population between 18 and 64, and you can split that population in 3 groups, and only 3 groups. First group is employed, according to the social security data. Okay? So they contribute to the social security, and they pay income tax. Okay? They are officially registered as employed in Belgium. That's those between 18 and 64 that are employed. The second category are the unemployed. They are seeking for a job, they don't have a job, they receive an employment allowance. Okay. And there is the residual, the last group, we call inactivity. And this is a kind of a mix of many different profiles. You have people on sickness leave, you have people who stay home, you have students, you have early retirement, so you have many different categories. So what we do, we just track over the last 15 years how these 3 groups have evolved at the national level, at the regional level, and at the very local level of a municipality. Okay? And what do we get? So let me give you, okay, a screenshot. So this is, this is dynamic. So what you get here is a nice 2-dimensional representation of these 3 dimensions. On the horizontal line, you have the proportion of inactive. That's the inactivity rate. Out of 100%, how many are inactive? You will have the student, you will have the early retirement, you will have the sickness leave, and so on. On the vertical axis, you have the unemployed. Okay? And you see the diagonal, they represent the bar you want to reach, which is the employment rate. You can reach the same employment rate with different combination of inactivity rate and unemployment rate. You can increase employment by reducing inactivity. You can also increase employment by reducing unemployment rate. And you can do it by a combination of the 2. So when you go on this platform, you scroll it from 2006 up to 2022, and you see for one big city, which is Anvers, the biggest city after Brussels, you see the trajectory. Okay? It's like a comet, and you see, okay, the trajectory of that comet since 2006. And what you see is that the employment rate has increased in Anvers because we move closer to a higher employment rate, the diagonal. And the way they have achieved that is by a combination of a reduction of unemployment, you move downwards, and a reduction of inactivity rate, you move to the left. Okay? That's Anvers. And the size of the ball represents the size of that municipality. In the background, you have all the other municipalities in Belgium, more than 500. In yellow, you have the Flemish municipalities. This is those municipalities that are closer to the objective of 80%. In the middle, you have the red municipalities. That's for the Walloon municipalities, 269 municipalities. And lagging behind, you have the 19 municipalities in Brussels. Okay? So you can compare. Okay? This is Gand. Okay? It's better positioned and closer to the 80% target than Anvers. And you compare with Charleroi. You see the position is entirely different, and the dynamics is also entirely different because Charleroi has slightly increased employment rate, by reducing mostly unemployment, but no effect, almost no effect on the inactivity rate, which is quite surprising because during that period, the inactivity rate of the women has decreased massively. So that means that the inactivity rate of the men has increased. Okay? Canceling out the reduction of the inactivity rate of the women. That's for Charleroi. And if you take Liège, this is very similar to Charleroi. And you can take Brussels, it's lagging behind. And you see, this is a kind of an outlier here, Brussels, because here the inactivity rate has increased. Although unemployment rate has decreased. So this is a way to fight, okay, this temptation from the politician to just use partial information. Unemployment in Brussels has been decreased from months to months, from year to years. That's correct. There is nothing wrong with that. But the fact is that it has been fully offset by an increase in the inactivity rate. So if you get people out of unemployment to move them as inactive, okay, you don't help to increase the employment rate. So we need to look at the 4 categories. Okay? So this is very accessible kind of approach, and people can appropriate that. They can enter their own municipality and they can compare with others. Okay? That's one illustration of this website. You have many others. You can see what's going on with the municipalities that are close to the border. We know we have a lot of transfrontier, okay, cross-border working, and so this will have an impact on the evolution of the employment rate, okay, at the neighboring, at the border municipalities. You can also, okay, check how commuters are evolving over time, okay, what we call the evolution of the route, les routes de l'after. And this is dramatically changing. Fewer commuters are entering in the big cities. Okay? More and more are working at the periphery of the big cities. So jobs are really moving out of the big cities. And this has an impact also on the employment rate in the big cities. Okay? So space matters, and you learn a lot from just this visualization, and you can start to think what's the driving force going on here, okay? And what's the implication, okay? Notably for the big cities and the financial sustainability of the big cities. This is another illustration that I find quite interesting. We use data, administrative data, to collect information about the size of the political sectors, not the size of the public sectors. How many politicians do we have in Belgium? Okay? It turned out that when we asked that question, it was impossible to have an answer. So we had to extract all that information that is dispersed from different reports, and we collect that across all the level of decision-making in Belgium. And you end up with a striking number. And this is where you have an impact. This is a striking number because you have exactly more than 30,000 politicians in Belgium. And in Belgium, we have exactly, okay, 30,000 square kilometers. So we have a sort of a political mass index. We have 1 politician per square kilometer. Okay? And you can give, okay, the size of the different group. And what you see here, it's in French, but most of them, they are at the very local level. They are at the municipal level. Okay? So we have many, but they are mostly at the local and provincial level. But you see the size of those groups. Conseillers communaux, this is the biggest group. Administrateur d'intercommunal, this is a political mandate. Okay? This is also a big group. You have the member of the CPAS, social assistance institution at the local level. This is also a big group. Okay? Les échevins, etc. The ministers and the parliament, they are small. And when you compare between regions, this is what you get. Okay? On the left, you have the number of political mandates in Flanders. On the right, the number of political mandate in Wallonia. In green, this is the local mandate. So you see, this is the biggest group. But what you observe is that we have twice more per habitant. We have twice more political mandate in Wallonia than in Flanders. And if you take the provincial level in orange, you also have twice more. Although we have the same number of province. So we have twice more. And if you move to the parliament, you have twice more member of parliament in Wallonia than in Flanders. Okay? So this is a big push at the regional government in Belgium for the Walloon government to go for a form of simplification and reduction of the political mandate, to simplify, to amplify, if you prefer. Okay? And notably, there is no discussion and political action to merge municipalities. Okay? So that's what I say, the good in the sense that you have an impact. Okay? The bad is where you have much less impact. Okay? This is an illustration where we did some collective work, bringing researchers, economists working on education. Education is a very difficult topic. Okay? But economists have contributed to this and to help out to advise evidence-based reform in education. And we produced 2 books. And first, it was a sort of an outlier, because in Belgium, the discussion about education reform is fully controlled by the sociologist and by the psychopedagogue. So it was kind of strange that economists were interested by that. They were not aware that economists were working on that. So the purpose of these 2 books was notably to advise and to push for inclusive education. So the way we did it is we bring evidence of inclusive education and we produce a new index, which is a social mobility index. And it's a very simple index. It's just measuring, if you want, the rank mobility between the socio-economic index of a student and the academic score of that student. Not the score, the ranking of that student. Okay? And there is interdecile mobility if you have upward mobility, coming from the lowest rank in terms of socio-economic index, moving to the top rank in terms of academic performance. Okay? So we measure this degree of mobility and we normalize it to 100%. So 100% is perfect mobility. It means that, in some sense, your social ranking is completely independent of your academic ranking. Okay? And we compare countries based on the PISA dataset, and we do observe that there is a huge heterogeneity across country. And one of the top performers in terms of social mobility is Canada. Canada is performing very well in that ground. And then we superpose that to a measure of the inequality of the test score. And we end up with this we call the Gatsby curve, because if you remember, the Gatsby from Alan Krueger was this kind of correlation between mobility, measured as the intergenerational elasticity of income, and the inequality of income. And there was a negative correlation between that. More inequality, less mobility. That was the empirical observation. And here, this is at the educational level. You have a negative correlation between inequality in the test score across students and interdecile mobility. So inequality, in some sense, is negatively associated to mobility. Okay? And we pursue in that direction, and we correlate mobility index with the overall performance of a school system. And the best performing school system have the highest, like Canada, have the highest mobility grade. So this is pushing in favor of inclusive, okay, of inclusive education system. We should really okay, maximize opportunity to tap in the reserve of talent among the poor kids. Okay? And there is a beautiful book by Xavier Jaravel, okay, in France. This is in French. This book is what's the name of this Nobel Prize in chemistry and physics? The Polish. Marie Curie. Okay, Marie Curie is from Morbihan. So the idea is that they are in very remote place, a reserve of talent that we should really exploit and develop. We are missing that reserve if we don't develop inclusive education. The bad experience is also from my work in the Pension Reform Commission. We produced a report in June 2014. It was a huge report, 800 pages. The president of the commission was Frank van den Broek, who is today the Minister of Health at the federal government. And it was a mistake because, in fact, there was no change whatsoever. One of the central messages of the report is that we should shift attention to retirement age to concentrate on the duration of the career and allow those who start very early their career to retire earlier. Okay? So it was a requirement of a uniform career duration rather than a uniform retirement age. So what the government did, that was the government Michel, well, they decided simply to postpone the retirement age uniformly from 65 to 66 in 2025 and to 67 in 2030. Okay? That was the only change. Okay? So there was no structural reform, and the structural reform we were proposing, which was to adopt a point system very similar to the German system, was rejected on the ground that the value of the point was a kind of lottery. Okay, so you see the lottery. So we cannot organize lottery with our social security. Social security is to provide guarantees. And here you will find the standard story, what I call the populism. The populism is to provide unconditional commitment. Easy to understand, easy to implement, easy to control. But those commitments, they are not sustainable. Okay? If population is aging, we need to consider the possibility that the duration of the career might be adjusted according to that. So we decided to go for a different approach and to provide a framework for a sustainable pension reform and to address the uncertainty related to the point system, that is the value of the point. We decided to go for a pension account. Okay, that is expressed in euro. And that works as a standard pension bank account. And there are two key drivers of this pension account. One is the indexation rate that you can adapt depending on the circumstances to balance the system. And there is the accrual rate that you can also adapt according to the situation. And we compare the different types of reform, reforming indexation or reforming accrual, and the application of that. The last, the very ugly one, is at the municipal level. So we decided to go, and together with François Gérard, who is now, he's a kind of a brilliant researcher now at the UCL London, working on developing country, tax reform, social security, doing very interesting work. We started this very early, 20 years ago, this ranking based on the dominance approach, multi-criteria, multi-dimensional analysis, and controlling for the revenue of the different municipalities. And we rank them, from the top to the bottom. Of course, this is not very pleasant for the local politician. And then we had a lot of pressure from them on my university, on my own university, and as a result of that, I decided to update the ranking on my own, including the Flemish municipalities, but I did it in a different institution because we decided to create a think tank that was completely independent and Brussels-based. Okay? And I use the occasion here to thank you. Sorry, sometimes I black. Frédéric, because you transmitted me the budget we were asking for to do this ranking at that time, and that was very useful because without controlling for the budget, it's easy to see, who is the most efficient in terms of municipality management. So it was an exercise about the visual exercise, and it was very impactful. So we repeated that exercise many times, but now I'm a bit fed up with that, so I don't do it anymore. But people come back on a regular basis to ask me if we will update, the ranking. So if you are interested, I can give you the code to do it. So the second part, so I will speed up, The second part is the struggle. The struggle is, it's very widespread, You cannot avoid this. This is between evidence and seduction. Just think about the Zuckman tax. Throughout this struggle, you will understand. You are mixing evidence and you are mixing seduction into this debate, clearly, and it's very difficult to escape from that. First, it's about the intent and the motivation. As an academic, evidence is the most important, so you aim to inform policy decisions based on objective, empirical finding. Your goal is to support rational, informed decision-making. That's your job. Seduction is different, You are interacting with policymakers. We are interacting with the media. And seduction is when you try to persuade, to influence, Sometimes even manipulating a little bit, The researcher, even in academia, may frame findings in a way that aligns with political interest or ideology to gain favor, funding or influence. Second struggle is about the use of data. Evidence, you should have a transparent use of the data. You should be clear about your methodology, the limitation of your approach, explicit about that, the uncertainties surrounding your analysis, peer review, replicability, and open to scrutiny. But in terms of seduction, this is a different story. Selective use of data, this is really the cherry picking. Remember my case, unemployment rate is decreasing in Brussels over the last 24 months. Yes, that's true, but it's only part of the story. Oversimplification or exaggeration of the findings to make them more appealing or political palatable. About this, just one recent experience I had, the dropout rate. Eurostat is publishing that for all countries. It's based on a survey. It's based on the labor force survey. And it's downwards everywhere. So that's the good news. We are in the right direction. We are moving in the right direction. We are reaching the Lisbon objective. Reality is not that because of the survivor bias. Those who dropped out don't answer those surveys. They are outside of your radar. How can you get them on board? Use the administrative data. And Flanders do have the administrative data. They have what's called the data loop. And if you check the data loop, you see the blue line. This is the school dropout. It's not going down, and it's bigger than the survey measured dropout. And it is even worse, because you miss, those dropping out. If you take the social gradient of this, the gap is growing. And how do you get the social gradient? Because in the Flemish school, if you receive a grant, you belong to the two lowest quintile, we can track, okay, your academic trajectories and whether you drop out or not, and we can compare with those who don't receive the grant. And you see the gap is growing. That's true that for those from upper income group, the dropout is going down. And this is reflected in the survey. But what is missing in the survey, this is the blue line. This is the poor kids who are dropping out. And they are outside of the radar screen. Okay? So this is an illustration of the importance of collecting the right data and using more and more the administrative data. I understand that for international comparison, you cannot use the administrative data. Okay? But at least at the national level, you should use as much as possible the administrative data. They are exhaustive and they are granular. Communication style, technical, cautious, qualified language, distinguished correlation, causality. The problem is this may lead to procrastination. This does not push for action. This is pushing for further study. And when there is an emergency, this is not really helpful. The alternative, seduction, emotion, confidence, strategic language that appeals to values, ideology, emergency. This proves that we must act now. This leads to fear, emotion, and overreaction. Okay? Taxing the rich today is really a kind of a mixture between these two. Audience engagement, encourage critical thinking, seduction, you seek to win support. It's very much marketing. Try to sell your message. Okay? Power and dependency, maintain academic independence, credibility over popularity, sometimes they are inversely correlated. Seduction reflects strategic dependency on political actors. Long-term versus short-term, this is what I said about populism and unconditional commitment. What they tell you, we go for a minimal pension of 1,500 euros. This is an easy number, easy to remember. That's my commitment. But it makes no sense. Due to inflation, okay, you will reach this minimum pension automatically by inflation. Okay, so there is no control for inflation, or you give a magic number for the retirement age. Okay, so take home, I'm finishing. Yeah. Two messages. Don't try to teach the policymakers. Okay, they are better than you. Don't do that. Okay, so your expertise is just theoretical. I know that between theory and practice there is no difference, but in practice there is one. There is one, and it's big. Because we don't go into how we do the reform. We say what should be reformed, but we don't explain how we do the transition. Okay? That's the most difficult part. Okay? Moving from one point to another equilibrium is not easy at all. And the second, in Medio Stat Virtus, it's a paper by Massimo Morelli, I think, about populism here. I find it very interesting. It's also inspired by Esther Duflo. In fact, do not fly too high. Okay? You will lose your audience. Don't be arrogant. Okay? But don't fly too low neither. Okay? Because you will lose the panoramic view. This is very much where you are helpful for the policymaker. Do fly mid-high. Okay? And stay humble, bring your own point to others to form a better pictures together as with pointillism. And I will end with Michel Seurat. Thank you very much.